Hey, what's up, B fam? Today we are continuing with our book study of Blended and Redeemed, and we are in chapter 6, and we're talking about blending our bunch. So today is going to answer a whole lot of practical questions for you, but also you're going to hear from my friends Ginger and Heidi. They're going to share some of their experiences, and so am I, and talk about maybe some of the things we did wrong, some of the things we wish we would have known back then. And then ultimately, you're going to walk away with today with some very what can I do to help blend my family in an easier, maybe even make it faster, a little less painful for everybody involved. You're going to walk away with like a handful of things that you can start even today. And today, this chapter, the blending our bunch, really is the base in the heart of enjoying your blended family. And you're going to see that as we talk over this next hour. So stay tuned. Right after this, we'll be right back.
When we first became a step family, just like you, we didn't quite know what we were getting into.
Scarlett and Randall Tandy here from Enjoying Your Blended Family, and we have been a blended family for over 15 years. And not only did we have to figure out how to handle the day-to-day struggles that come with being in a step family, about 7 years in, our biggest fear happened, and each of our kids went to go live with their other parent.
We went through seasons of zero connection with each one of our kids, and we had to get really creative on ways to reestablish and reconnect those relationships.
And through prayer and becoming very intentional, God restored our family in true God-like fashion and made it better than we could have ever imagined or hoped for.
So God has called us to help other families do the same thing, to make those connections. So if you're looking for stronger relationships, deeper connections, and more communication, then we believe it truly starts with being intentional and creating these fun opportunities in our family.
Click the link so that you can get quick access to the process that we use to help you find common interests in your family so that you can be more intentional on spending time with your kids, your spouse, and your family as a whole.
We believe you can take the step out of step family and create a blended family that you truly enjoy.
You can find our podcast on Enjoying Your Blended Family on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And while you're sitting there, go ahead and follow us on social media.
So when you have more fun, you'll see less problems.
All right, guys. So I am back, and we have at the top left corner, we have Heidi from Marriage in Motion 365. And then at the bottom here, we have Ginger from the Family Core. So if you've been following along at all over the last several weeks, we've been taking the Blended and Redeemed book that Scott and Vanessa from Blended Kingdom Family have written, and we've been breaking it down chapter by chapter by chapter, and they're helping. We're doing it book club style, so they're reading the book along with me, and then we're coming on here and we're just sharing what spoke to us, just like if you were doing a book club in person. So if you have not got the book yet, get the book, purchase the book. Yep. Okay. You purchase the book and then go back to week 1 and start it with us. And our DMs are always open. So if something speaks to you that one of us says in one of the episodes that you're listening to, always feel free to reach out to us. All three of us spend most of our time on Instagram. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Yeah, all three of us are mostly on Instagram. We dabble a little bit in other social medias, but feel free, again, if anybody says something that speaks directly to you and you're like, I would love more information on that, reach out to all three of us. Now, this chapter, the very beginning, I think what sets apart what we do, Heidi and Ginger, and what we believe, and y'all can tell me if I'm wrong, and what Scott and Vanessa believe as well, from some other step family or blended family platforms out there, is some people believe that it's not your kid and you're not going to love them the same, or you don't have to love them. Like, I see posts on that all the time. Like, I don't love my step kid and that's okay. Or if you don't love your step kid, it's okay. And that absolutely breaks my heart. And that's one of the things that they cover very first thing in this chapter, because love is what we're ultimately commanded to do. I mean, we love strangers out there that we have no connection with. And this is another human being that lives in our house, or is at least a direct connection to someone that lives in our house, right? And so to say that you don't need to love them, to me, is unacceptable. I mean, that's my
Yeah,
thought.
I
What do you
100% agree.
think? Okay,
I
y'all agree with that?
100% agree. I think Heidi agrees too. I 100% agree with you. Scarlett, when you take those marriage vows and you say, I do, in a blended family, there's no surprise. I mean, I'm sure some people have been surprised, but there's no surprise. You know what he's bringing in as far as children are concerned. He knows what you're bringing in. When you say I do, you're not only saying I do to that individual, you're saying I do to the children you bring along with you. That isn't to say that you're not going to have disagreements or that you're just going to fall madly in love with that child straight away, but you are to make every effort to love the children and the generation that comes with him or her completely. Our family verse is Mark 10:9, and that is to we promise to love. That's what we said in I do, and we promised also to let no man separate what God has joined together. So God joined us together. God joined James and I together, and that brought my son in and his daughters in, and essentially then that is his son and my daughters. And we actually don't even use the word step in our household. So I agree with you, Scarlett, 100%. Those are my children. I love them just as my own. And I do not agree with that's a stepchild I don't have to love.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you for, because I guess I didn't ask y'all's opinion on that at the time. Heidi, I mean, do you feel the same way, or do
Yeah,
you?
well, absolutely. And here's the bottom line. Jesus, before he left earth, said, here's the two things: love God with all your heart and your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, who's your closest neighbor? Your spouse and your children. So I'm pretty sure he's telling us we have to love them, where in the Bible not to love. So, I mean, that is just a fundamental Christian value. First and foremost is to love everybody. We don't have to like everybody, but we do have to love them. And I mean, I think it's ridiculous that anybody would say, I mean, even to just look at the fact that that child is half my spouse. If you're telling the child or not loving them, then how does your spouse not even say, well, if they don't love half of me that's in that child, are you really telling your spouse that you love them unconditionally as well?
Yeah.
Just my thoughts.
Yeah. And I think
Agreed.
where people get so confused is they think that it means it's going to look the same or feel the same when it comes. And that is completely different. The way that I feel towards my two biological kids that I grew inside of me versus the way I feel towards Riley, my stepdaughter, and the way that I love our foster daughter who came in when she was 17. You know, like when people come in at different stages of life, and like they talked about in the book, you're experiencing different things. So it is a different kind of love. But to say you don't need to love them, I'm like, that's to me ridiculous, because we're called as Christians to love in general. And I liked how they put it in the book, and I highlighted the whole thing. I highlighted so much in this chapter. They said on page 145, John makes it crystal clear, and this is John, it's speaking in the Bible, in the New Testament. John makes it crystal clear that love is not only from God, but God also is love, and he enables us to love. The power and intensity of love comes from God, not from our genetics, nor or personal history with someone. In him, we can love our stepchildren just as intensely as we love our biological children. It may not even happen overnight. And yeah, it might feel awkward at times for you for a little while, and for you and your stepchild to learn each other and how to navigate your new relationship, but give it time. And he was basing that off of 1 John 4:7-8, which is, beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. So he was basing that part of the chapter off of that scripture. And then the same scripture that you guys were sharing as well. Like, at the core of who we are as Christians is to love. And that should start first in our home with those people. Even if we don't always, you hear the saying, we don't always like them, but we love them. But the goal, even with not liking them, I don't always like my own biological kids in some of the choice. I always like them actually, but I don't always like the choices that they make. And learning to see past those choices or the actions and the pain that they're experiencing, and able to see the human being that God has created. And like it said in the book as well, that he has chosen us to be these children's step parent. Like, you were chosen. You may not have been chosen as their biological mom and dad, but you have been placed in their life for such a time as this. And there are valuable lessons that you are able to, as their step parent, to impart into them. Anything that y'all, any thought process on that?
Heidi, you want to take that one first?
Well, I mean, I don't know much more to say because I think that's just the bottom line. We have to love. And it's just about building a relationship, just like we have to be intentional about building a relationship with Christ. We have to be intentional about our marriage and putting that first. We have to be intentional about building a relationship with those bonus children, because, like you said, you could not ever have your own biological children, but even as community members, we are called be a light for Christ in the world. So God has obviously picked us as bonus parents for a reason. And I don't believe there's any accidents or coincidences. I believe God's hand in all of those things. So I think you just have to trust that, even though that might be rough, God has chose you to be in these children's lives and in this family and to be married to your spouse for a reason. And we just have to trust God. He knows how it's going to come and how it's going. It's really just laying your marriage and your children at the foot of the cross and saying, God, I don't know what to do, but I know you do, and I will go to you for the answers.
Yeah. You
Agree.
agree with that? Okay,
Agree with that.
so basically, and like, you just touched on that. Okay, so yeah, we're supposed to love them. So what does that look like? And they immediately go into that in the next part of the book, where children spell love Time. And
Yeah.
yes, that is perfect. That is what we believe. All the kids, exactly what it was saying on there. Children want your time and energy. They want that time and energy focused on them. So we know, okay, like, we're supposed to love them. How do we love them? We spend time with them. And this is one of those areas I'm going to ask y'all to share y'all's past and what this looked like in your family when you started the blend. But it talks about in the book that a lot of people get this wrong in the beginning, because it is it's kind of awkward or hard, or you don't want to be rejected, all of these different things. You feel like you'll get to that later, and they're like, okay, well, we're not going to spend that time bonding with each other or trying to connect, because we don't really think that they want that from us, to the point where we're like, okay, well, we're not going to focus on building a relationship. And what Vanessa says in the book, you're building a relationship regardless. What kind of relationship are you choosing to build? And he talks, gives a couple examples. I can't do it right now because I'm too busy, or I don't think little Sally wants a relationship with me. Regardless what they want necessarily right now, whatever you're putting into motion is going to really play out the next years in your blended family, unless you choose to do something differently. And then I think it can always be saved, and you can come in and start connecting, regardless if you don't hear this book and y'all been blending 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that looks like. Your kids still want that time from you. Even your adult children still want to feel loved and accepted and have your time. So we'll start with you, Ginger, since Heidi started with the last one. Is this an area that you feel like your family went in with the right mindset or learning curve there?
There's always a learning curve, and every child is different. So the time that each of them wanted for their particular love language, like each of their love languages with me are different than they are with my husband. So all the children that we blended in the beginning, we had a 12-year-old boy, a 7-year-old girl, and a 4-year-old girl. So immediately all of their love languages with my husband were words of affirmation. They just wanted to be affirmed. They just wanted to know that they were welcome. They just wanted to know that they were accepted. They wanted to know what they were doing. They're very academic children, and so they wanted that response. I want to show you my spelling test. I want to go over my math with you. I want to go, whatever it is. And so that was pretty easy, right? Because he was out of the house so often that it was just easy for them to immediately ask for praise and then get it back from him. Because at the time he was working, in all honesty, probably an easy 100 hours a week, no
wow.
fail. And so at the time that we blended, we had a custody court battle going on. He was working 100 hours a week. We were starting a new business. We were managing exchanges and calendars. And so it was pretty rough in the beginning, in the start. And so until we made the shift, it was easy for him to give those words of affirmation straight away. Maybe they weren't done, to the best of our ability at the time. And that's probably where we struggled. And then me trying to find each of their love languages with the transition, it took time. So we intentionally dated each of the children together so that it wasn't, a lot of people say, oh, you take your children and date them, and he takes his children and date them. We didn't do it that way. What worked for us is that James and I dated each of the children together so that they could learn what we were as a couple, and that we were together, that God had joined us together, and then we dated them intentionally. So, one of them maybe wanted to go bowling, but one of them maybe wanted to go to the bookstore, and one of them wanted to go get her nails done. Whatever it was, we started to learn their love languages, and we started to date them intentionally, just so that we could help with the blend. And that's what worked for us. That's not going to work for everybody. And like you said, it doesn't go right all the time, but we did our best to intentionally learn from each child what their needs were, and then how we could serve those needs individually as parents, and then how we could help in the blend with their siblings. So that's what worked for us. And it didn't work every day, all day, but it worked out long-term for us.
Did y'all have something that took place that you're like, something has got to give, especially with him working 100 hours a week?
Yes. So in the beginning, it seemed like it would be fine for us because we actually saw each other at work. So we both saw each other in the operating room in the day hours, but he was he still was being called out for cases at night. And so we would work during the day hours together, and the kids were at school and it was fine. So we were still seeing each other. But then when I would get home and facilitate what was going on at home, there were nights where the kids didn't even see him, or he would come to the door, change his clothes, hit the dinner table, his pager would go off, and he would have to say goodbye to everybody and go back out the door. And there were times where I wouldn't see him again until either the following day at work, because he's gone to the hospital, worked all night, and then gone to the back to where I was and started work again. And the kids would never see him. And so he came to a realization when he came in off call one morning, and our son was pouring a bowl of cereal, and he happened to go change his clothes and came back, but the cereal was put away. And he said to our son, where does mom keep the cereal? And our boy thought he was joking. And so he kind of laughed it off and went and sat down and started his morning, and he was serious. He had no idea where the cereal was or belonged in our house. And so he said, I think we need to change something, which made me ecstatic because it was a lot. And so he took a week off, and it was in November. And our daughter at the time, who was 7, had a Thanksgiving fall festival where they were doing a little choir event. And he took the week off, and was just going to run my schedule and see what the kids did and see what I did, and that, take a break. So we took a week off and we walked into the event at the school, and she was at a smaller school. So there were about 12 kids in her class. So we walked in, sat in the back row, and she's taller. So she got on the back riser, and it's quiet and they're getting ready to sing. And she looks out in the audience and she says, and it is quiet in the room. She looks at us and she looks at my husband and she says, "Why are you here? You've never been to anything of mine."
Oh, wow.
And everybody in the room, of course, then paused and turned around to look at us while we're sitting in the back of the room. And he just said, "That's it. That's it. It's got to stop." And so for him, I think men, and especially in a blend, try and set that pillar, like, I'm the breadwinner. I'm going to bring home. I'm going to provide. We've got everything going on. You're running the house, and he's extremely helpful at home. But he recognized immediately, like, my two oldest children that are going to age out of this house first don't see me as knowing what's going on. I'm not here. I don't know where the cereal is, things like that. So I think that was probably, those were the straw on the camel's back for him. And it benefited his change, or his desire, from what he was hearing back from those two children, was a generational change, because then the next daughter down got more accustomed to him being around. And then the next two down literally say, "Why is he going to work today?" Because we've cut him down to like 3 days a week. And so they're like, "Is he going to work today?" And our older three are like, "Yeah, this is what dad does," because that's what they were used to. So that was what changed the whole dynamic. And again, it was a generational change. We had to make some household changes, but we've never gone without. God always provided, even in that change. And what we're taking with us out of this world, we realized immediately it didn't have to be material things. It needed to be time with our children, which we now have back. So
That, I mean, gave me chills and made me cry, just because I think so many people can relate to that story, especially for men.
Yeah.
And being able to come to a point, and I guess it gives me chills and makes me cry, because God is so good, right? He can take the littlest of moments and open our eyes. Whereas maybe as a wife, you could ask him those questions, or "I want more of you," or "I need you here." But to have those two experiences, even though they were probably, eye-opening, or that moment with y'all's daughter at the school, like a little bit crushing of your own spirit, for that to be the case. But how we get to choose to do something about that, because we get this life with our kids. We are chosen to be their parents. And, we did something very similar, as far as we sacrificed, where here in the area I live in, most men work out at the plants, and most men are working shutdowns all the time, and they're not home. They're not home on holidays. They're not home on evenings. They can't go to church with their family, and they're making a lot of money though. And so they're making what, like, Randall and I would make busting our butts total, they were making, for one person in their household. And so financially we struggled, but yet we were always able to be present. And that was a sacrifice that we were willing to take on for our family, and to be able to give them that kind of time. I'd like to hear from you as well, Heidi. Is this something that you think y'all were successful at in the beginning, or did y'all have one of these same kind of moments that Ginger just explained?
Oh gosh, I wish I could say we had the fairy tale blending situation. We probably were different. Both Kenny and I had been married obviously before, duh. But we had kids, and his children were older when we got together. So his youngest was 17 when we got together. My two were 3.5 and 10. And they had a biological father who was totally, and he was present. So we were constantly juggling the kids back and forth. So for us, we actually had an empty nest, usually once, twice a month. So it'd be like we would have the boys and they would go to their dad. So what we did wrong is we really were just infatuated with each other, Kenny and I, and our lives really were just about rescuing each other from our past. And that's not what we should do. But our first few months was all about just getting to know each other. And I want to say we didn't even really think about our kids in the beginning and how this was going to affect them, because we were just so excited to find someone who was not dysfunctional like our spouses, our ex-spouses. So it felt good to be needed and wanted and loved in a way that we thought we needed to. So unfortunately, we didn't pay a lot of attention to either of our children, our sets of children, and how our relationship would be affecting them. We dated for 2 years before we got married, but we moved in together. Again, we were not living God's law for our marriage. And so the two boys had to come live with us part-time. And when we chose things to do, it was like, what does Kenny and Heidi want to do? And they would come along with us. Now, thank God they liked all those things, but I would say our biggest regret was doing what Ginger said. We didn't date the kids. We didn't give them a chance to really get to know, his girls didn't get to know me at first, and then to know the boys only because they lived with us and we had to do daily life. So if I had to go back, I would really probably have not even introduced my kids to Kenny for a lot of months before we even got the dating out of our system, and then slowly introduced the families to each other. We obviously would have never moved in together before we were married. I've been baptized since I was 9, but didn't mean I had one foot in the world and one foot at church, and didn't always do everything right. So that would probably be the biggest regret, was not, really getting to know the kids that way. And now we all have great relationships. The boys actually probably prefer Kenny over me, which is amazing. And then his daughters I'm really close to his daughters. And we've, have grandkids now, and it's just such a blessed relationship now. But again, in the beginning, I would definitely do things different to get to know the kids and have them get us, so that they're the new parent, the new bonus parent's not thought of as a threat or a
Right.
thorn in the flesh of the family. And so, yeah, that's our truth. That's what happened.
That's
Yeah.
awesome that you're that transparent, because a lot of people won't even identify with that, or it's not even a point of admitting. It's just a point of that is your story, and your story helps change and better people around you. So thanks for sharing that, because that's big.
Yeah, and that's our goal, is to make sure people don't make the same mistakes we do.
Right.
Yeah. So did y'all have a moment as well where y'all came to this realization, like, we need to start spending time with them? Or was it just nature took its course, the kids got older, and then they just accepted y'all's situation?
So I think the girls was a whole different relationship than the boys, because the boys were younger and they were, I want to say one of the hardest things for the boys was the fact that they had a father who loved them and was involved. Now, he did things different at his house, so there's always that issue, but they knew their dad loved them. And their hardest thing to get with Kenny was, I'm not sure I'm allowed to love this man, because I don't want to be loving somebody who maybe I shouldn't like because he's trying to take the place of my father. I mean, that's what their little thinking was.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our stuff in the beginning was, hey, you don't have to call him dad. You can call him what you want. You don't have to tell him you love him. He's going to tell you whenever you're comfortable and ready. And we had to do a lot of bonding that let them know it's okay to love Kenny as your stepdad or bonus dad. That does not negate the fact that you love your father. And it doesn't mean you can only love one of them at once. So once we, got married and really saw that, there was some tension, especially with her son, because he's like, you're not going to be my dad. We really had to make sure that he's like, that's right. I'm not trying to take this place. I'm not trying to discipline you. I'm just trying to be a bonus person in your life who's going to love you, support you, and be there for you.
Hmm. Yeah. And you brought up a good point as well, of having those conversations, I think makes all the difference. And I remember hearing that from Ron Deal in his Smart Step Family book, and talking about just having the very intentional conversations with the kids, especially. And it talks about it in this book as well, about like what you're going to call each other. And so we can talk about that next, as far as like, so we just wrapped up just as far as spending time. Your kids want time with you, your biological kids and your stepchildren, they want time with you. And our prayer is that you guys figure this out sooner than later. Cause like we said, you're creating a relationship regardless of if you think you are or not. And we wish we would have been more intentional. We were pretty intentional dating our own children, and we were very busy and involved in their lives, and we showed up for them on a regular basis, but we didn't date the family as a whole. And we didn't do, besides going to church, but when we went to church, we were all separate, right? Because the kids
Right.
go in kids church, and Randall was playing on the worship team, and we even went to 2 different churches for 5 years. Like we went to both churches each Sunday, or we alternated. We went to this church one Sunday and we went to this church the other, because neither one of us was willing to give up what was our normal. And so even when we were at church, we didn't, one of us was volunteering, one of us, serving. We barely sat together and did things together as a family. We would do meal times, but even that was chaos because the kids didn't ever want to eat what I was cooking for and stuff.
Right.
And so I wish we would have had more family game nights, just to piggyback off of the regrets of what I wish we would have had. I am a planner. I like to plan events and parties, and we would do a lot of things with the church, a lot of camping and that kind of stuff, like outings, VBS and everything. But as our core in our household, we did not give ourselves time to bond and blend in that way. And then we didn't spend I was more intentional than Randall, like as far as with Riley as my stepdaughter, but him choosing to individually date the kids, or us, like Ginger, how y'all did, taking one kid as a couple. We were not great. I was horrible as a mother. I'll admit this. I was horrible that my kids were a package deal. And even if one did something wrong, I would like make it both of them. Y'all always do this, or y'all made a mess, and it would be one of them, or you didn't do this, and I'm talking about both of them, but really it was just one of them. Like, I don't know why I always had them. If one did something wrong, it was as if they both made those mistakes and didn't individualize them, even for my own biological children there. And so when we blended, though, we had no idea that it would be wise to have a conversation of letting the kids take the lead, like it talks about in the book, as far as what they're going to call their step parent, or even their extended family, their step grandparents. And when my daughter wanted to naturally call Randall dad, my stepdaughter was not okay with it. And she was very verbal about that. And so she kind of lashed out, and then we decided it was best let's just stick with our first names when it comes to the parents. And then even with the grandparents, my stepdaughter's very territorial over her grandma. Like, this is my grandma, not your grandma. You cannot call her Granny. And so they would call her Miss Allison. And looking back on it, we wish we would have had some more heart conversations and really get to the root of that. But you don't know what you don't know. And we were just in survival mode in the beginning. And so then once you establish that, though, it's really hard to go back and say, well, if you want to call me mom now, you can. Because now they're at a certain age, it's like awkward and weird. So how did y'all handle that? Do you feel like it went well? And what would you have done differently?
You want to go, Heidi, or you want me to go?
I'll go ahead and go.
Okay.
I mean, again, like I said, the boys had their bio dad in their life. I don't think they would have been comfortable talking to and calling Kenny dad at all. And now as they're older, they just say my other dad. They just say that without explanation. And I think as an adult, we can just say, I don't care if you understand that or not. But we just let the kids call him whatever he felt, and we allowed it. We never even had an intentional conversation. So like you, Scarlett, it was never something we decided together. The boys just called him Kenny, and then called me Heidi. Now, as we're older and they're describing us to other people, they'll say that's my mom, just because, oh, stepmom or bonus mom. And then you have to get into the whole conversation about, oh, you have 2 moms or whatever. So, but I will tell you a fun side note about being a grandma. Since I'm a grandma now, that happened 14 years ago for the first time, which is amazing. I was under 40. And I said, well, and I sat with my daughter and said, well, you have a biological what does she want to be called? And then her husband's father, I said, what does she want to be called? Since I'm the bonus grandma, I don't want to take that position. So she said, well, whatever you think. And I said, well, I don't think I should be 39 years old and anybody call me grandma. That's just not okay. And so I decided, I'm half Swedish. So I decided to go with the Swedish name for grandma, which is more. And everybody loves it. And all the grandkids call me that. But be something that you do as a family is look at your heritage and your family heritage and come up with a fun name that can be in place of mom or dad that you guys kind of have created, like Mima or whatever you want to call it. But so that's what we did with the grandbabies. But you could also do that in parenting. You could sit the kids down and say, okay, mom has already taken over here. I don't want to be called stepmom. Let's talk about, I don't know, I'm German. This, let's find out a fun name or create your own made up name. But that worked in grandparenting. So I think that would work really well for parenting as well.
Yeah, I would agree. We quickly, James has always just called me Ginge, and the kids immediately just started calling me Gingy. And so when they were young, they just addressed me as Gingy, and that Gingy was coming. And or if I was doing something at the school, they would say, you know, my Gingy's coming. And nobody ever questioned it, which was okay for me. So, and I was totally fine with that. They definitely did not need to call me mom. They had a biological mom at the time that was splitting the time with us, or, you know, I think that we had discussed before, we had a very litigious case with her. And so we let them age away from that. And when it came the time that they were not visiting, or there was a distinct separation in the relationship, my oldest daughter transitioned first. There was something very ironic that had happened, and it was a line in the sand for her. And so she never addressed her again as that is my mom. And she just transitioned on her own. It was never forced. My younger daughter, which then became the middle daughter, transitioned on her own, which was, again, totally fine. So that took her a little bit longer, but it was still in the same developmental age bracket, I would say. And now they don't address me any different. They just say, that's my mom and dad. And they address the biological individual as her name. So when they speak about her, it is just her given name, and they don't add that into conversation, especially with people that just meet them. That's just a separate part of their life, and they don't address it anymore. With our son being 12, I think it was more or less like James did a phenomenal job of you have a dad, and I'm not trying to replace that. And the 12-year-old looked at it and said, okay, yeah, I have a dad. You don't have to replace him. And we were sharing all of his life. We shared 50-50 custody. What the benefit of James's behavior was in, I'm not trying to replace him. I just love your mom. When our son met our daughters for the first time, in his mind, he knew your dad loves my mom, and that is it. So you and we're going to be best friends forever because our parents love each other. And so it became, then James's response could have been totally different, but it wasn't. It was more of a, whether he recognized it or not, it was more nurturing. And then a 12-year-old boy turned around and made that more nurturing with his soon-to-be sisters. And it was just a blessing. But believe me, like Heidi said, we were just so in love at the time, and we were going to face the world together. It was us against the world. And so God definitely had his hand in helping us navigate the pinball better than we recognized it, because our blend wouldn't be as blending beautiful as it was. And we definitely wouldn't have been as redeemed as we feel that we are now without God having those touches on each of the relationships through our blending. So I went with the kids' call, what they decided that they were going to call me over time. Now that they're all adults, it's kind of weird because our oldest will sometimes say, give this to your mom, or give this to your dad, or give this. I'm like, I'm your mom too, like there's no different, or it's it's kind of funny because I don't know, he's always been that way, but he'll say to what the world considers his biological or half siblings, he'll say, give this to your mom. I'm like, I'm your mom. Or he'll say to his, what is considered a step sister, he'll say, go give this to your mom. I'm like, I'm your mom too. I'm everybody's mom. So it's kind of funny. So there just wasn't ever like a distinction. It's just that we let everybody, address the way that they were going to address. Now, for our oldest, if the four of us, his biological dad and his stepmom, and then myself and my husband are in the same place, he'll just throw everybody off and say, these are my parents. It's like, and he's like, yeah, those are my parents. And that's it, because he doesn't feel like he needs to have the conversation. So when we've been at events over the last, 12, 14 years ish, he'll just say, those are my parents, and not make a distinction. So, you got to let the children choose, because later in life, it just is what it is. I'm not a grandma yet, and I'm thankful that I'm not, because I still have a 5-year-old, but I'm sure that day will come. And then you have that division, like on James's side of the family, it's Nana and Pop-Pop, but on my side of the family, it's Mimi and Pop-Pop. So we're just going to have to let the kids decide what that is, or the grandkids decide what that is.
Yeah, that's the joke going around our house, because the baby only makes certain sounds so far. I mean, she says some words, but only like things that start with the M sound, or things that start with the B sound. So the joke is that I'm going to change my name to whatever she says, that I'm going to make, because she can't say the G to save her life. And just to kind of hit on both of those things before we go on to the next part of the book. For one, being a grandparent, and I think we talk about this on our social media a little bit. I have a reel that hasn't gone out yet. That goes along with some music, and it's like everybody else is posting their husband. Well, but what about the grandbaby that brings your whole blend together? Because the grandbaby has truly bring tears to my eyes, has truly brought like the entire family, like everybody just loves Violet, and right, nobody says that's my step niece or whatever. Right. Yeah. We're just her grandparents, and it has nothing to do with biology there. She just loves us all like 100% unconditionally. And so I think, Heidi, great example and great idea of when you get that name and using that heritage, and even doing that for your mom and dad name. I know like my sister-in-law, they're not a blended family, but they have German roots. And so they call, their dad, Papa, which is not a normal thing you would call your dad Papa, but hearing the little kids be like, Papa, Papa. And it's just, that's comes from their heritage. So finding something that is other than mom or dad, or using those nicknames, like how you were saying Ginger with Gingy, that came for us later in the years, that Riley started calling me Charlay, out of an accident at the bowling alley that got typed in, and it came out Charlay, and that's how she signs. And when she calls me Charlay, it's just as her calling me mom. Like that's the term of endearment that it has attached to it. And she also will say my mom, and she's talking about me now when she's talking to other people. It just does make it a little bit easier than explaining the whole dynamics of it. And just a quick story, just for anybody out there, because you hear our stories, and we're several years down in our blend, so you get to see the hope that comes from it, the things that come on the other side when you stay the course and stick with it, even during the hard parts of it. Because Riley, when she moved back, so Riley, my oldest Riley, which she's been living in Alabama the last year, and she just moved back in with us. And she said right before she moved home, God had given her a dream, and it was our family here in our house. I just told y'all the story earlier of I wish we would have had more family time to bond. And she's like, God had given her this dream, and we were all sitting around the table, like laughing and joking. And she's like, after she had had the dream, she woke up and she said, I have been a horrible stepsister. She said, and this was truth. I mean, I'm telling you, I just shared with y'all how territorial she was over her dad, her grandparents. Her mom's side of the family, even though they were half siblings, were completely 100% her whole siblings in her mind. They were her brothers and sisters. But my children, her step siblings, were never considered that. Even now, even last Christmas, when she's like, oh, I just bought gifts for my brothers and sisters. So I'm thinking she bought stuff for my kids, like for Devin and Riley, my biological children. And Christmas comes around and she hadn't got anything for any of them. And I'm like, wait, she just said she spent all of her money on her brother and sister's gift. She didn't get them anything. And so I brought it up to her and she's like, oh, I meant, like my brothers and sisters. And I'm like, we've been doing this for 15 years. These are your brothers and sisters. And so we're at a point where we can have these heart to hearts now. And so I guess between that and in opening her eyes up, she said, when I move home, and this was while she was still in Alabama, she said, when I move home, I want to be more intentional in my relationships with them. I feel like we have no relationship now because I did not allow us to have a relationship. And so such a beautiful thing to see her being very intentional now, her reaching out in these areas and texting or spending time being the great aunt, like an awesome, not a great aunt, but an awesome aunt to her niece, which is technically her step niece. And so I just wanted to share that story to give you hope if you're like, is it always going to be like this? Your kids do grow, they do mature, and they do make decisions to be more involved in your family, like Heidi was saying, as well as those adult kids. The step really does start to be less noticeable and it becomes more just, this is our family. So now I don't know if this is the very last part that I wanted to talk about. There's actually two things that I wanted to, the whole chapter actually was amazing, but
I know.
One thing that stuck out to me was that expectations is the enemy of joy. And I lived a life of having these expectations in my head, what I thought our blended family was supposed to look like. And I allowed it to rob the joy of what it actually was. Did either of you, Ginger, we'll let you go first. Did you experience this in your family of your expectations robbing that joy from you?
Absolutely, 100%. So I'm that mom that, picture day, I want everything to be perfect, and holidays, I want everything to be perfect, and timing. And I started to recognize battling with an individual. So we parallel co-parented on one side with our oldest, and the next two down. It was it was just tough. So if we were supposed to, if the court order said we were going to get, Thursday, Friday, because that was the holiday and that was Christmas Eve and Christmas or whatever it was no fail. The individual would throw a wrench in. We would show up for pickup at, whatever time it was on Thursday, and she wouldn't show up, or she would say, oh, I thought you had Saturday, Sunday. It was just, and so my heart would break because I'm such an individual that is heavy on tradition, that I'm like, we're supposed to be making cookies at this time, and we're supposed to be doing this at this time, and we're supposed to be decorating the tree at this time. And so I had it all in my mind that that's the way it needed to be. And I started recognizing that it was starting to affect my children in a way that was proving negative, because I would say, this has to be this way, and then we have to rush through this and do all of these things, but really they just wanted to enjoy the moment. So I started to lend more grace to knowing that the problem was going to happen. And if it didn't happen and my negative expectation that didn't come true, then it was a benefit, right? Then we could decorate the cookies on time or decorate the tree or whatever. So I needed to, I literally, you guys will think this is funny. I literally had my other half on the other side of the custody battle, the other mom, say to me one day, you need to lower your expectations of what I'm able to do. And then she eventually ended up saying that to my daughter at one point, when my daughter then became accustomed to, these are my expectations, this is how we run this house. And she started to fall in sync with that. She then literally said to her in her early teen years, you need to expect less of me.
Wow.
And it dawned on her that you're supposed to be the role model in my life of whom I should expect a role model, 2 and 4, and you want me to expect less. And it really then helped me explain, like, don't put expectations on other people. Don't put expectations on our family. Don't put expectations. You can only control yourself, and you can't control the outer world. And I think that her function is that she wanted to disappoint, because then it was disruptive. And so if we started to lessen up on the desire to control those expectations, it made it a lot easier, and my children were less affected, and it made them better at, I would always say, okay, adapt and overcome. So she was 4 hours late. We're just going to adapt. We're just going to change the schedule. It's going to be fine. And so now they're actually very good at adapting and overcoming. And when something doesn't go the way that we had planned, they're very good at picking up the pieces and making it look as flawless as possible. So I didn't recognize that would become a benefit, but we tried to use it as a positive and not a negative.
Yeah, what a great life lesson that you get to walk away from, is that adaptability and to be flexible, because life is going to do that to us regardless. And I think it does the day-to-day life is one thing, but then in your vision, when you have these holidays and expectations of that, and you just want to feel some normalcy when it comes to having a celebration, and everything has to become a whole thing because you're having to deal with another side of the family in there. And even if it's in good situations, you have excellent co-parents that you're working with, your time is still divided. And that is the hard thing. You're still having to say, okay, well, I have to either give up this holiday or this holiday. And so they talk about that in the book, as well as creating these new family traditions, creating these new ways that you're going to celebrate the holidays, and then sticking with that and make something that is specifically for your family. Heidi, do y'all have a family tradition that y'all have created? I have Randall in my head with his family tradition.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for me, I was probably such a pleaser that I didn't mind switching holidays. So for us, our tradition was actually to have Thanksgiving or Christmas even a week before, because we had older children and stuff who started getting married, and it was like too hard to get everybody on that same day. So we actually, one of our traditions is like Thanksgiving is usually the week before or the weekend before for us. And then Christmas just really is about every family doing and then we can make time. But when I was little, I loved getting Christmas tree ornaments. It's been one of my favorite things to do since I was a child. So I started when my boys were born. Every year they get a Christmas ornament for the tree. And now my oldest son is 28 and my youngest son is 21. But I started to include my bonus children and now the grandchildren and my husband. So everybody every year gets a Christmas ornament, and that's just something that we have is like it kind of came from my side of the family, but I really just incorporated it, made it part of ours. And the grandchildren, oh my gosh, they love getting them. And the blessing about it is like when our son moved out and now he's married, it's like he has a whole tree full of ornaments that that he can look back and just point to his childhood, and they each mean something. And so every year everybody gets an ornament, usually having to deal with their lives. So whatever sport they were playing or whatever happened to them, if they got a new job or a career. So that is one of the things that we kind of did that I just love still doing, and has become a tradition for us.
Oh yeah, I love that. And then yeah, and there's so many different ways that you can make these traditions, right? Like taking a piece of your own family tradition, or coming up with something like all together what your family does during this time. Let the kids have some input on that as well. Funny, because I like to have control over certain situations, and I'd learned some things through the things that we had been discussing in blended families. And so last year I chose to take the pressure off of everybody, and we were going to do Thanksgiving early, like a week early. And then it came down to Thanksgiving and nobody had any plans. Nobody was cooking. Like I was trying to relieve all of the children for feeling like they have to come with me. And now here came Thanksgiving and nobody had dinner anywhere because nobody else planned
Okay.
anything. And so also know your family, know what the stage of life they're in. Like don't jump the gun on that. I was doing it a little before it was necessary. Just trying because my kids were starting to date and they have their extended families and all of that as well. So I was like, okay, let me just do this. And then I laughed because nobody had Thanksgiving. So we're not doing that again this year. We're like, we'll do Thanksgiving at regular Thanksgiving time, guys. And we're going to try a new tradition this year of going camping after Thanksgiving, but not all of my kids like camping. So they won't all participate, but it's something new that we're going to do and incorporate and see if those want to join. They can join us. And if they don't, then, no harm, no foul kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, Scarlett, what I would like to say, just to really quickly piggyback on what you just said, is I think that's amazing is to learn to be flexible. What's working, what's not working. And there's different seasons in your life, not just as a married couple, but also in your blended family. There's so many different seasons that it's going to look different now for you guys, especially you, Ginger. You have little kids at home still. We're empty nesters. And so it's a different look to our blended family now than it did 18 years ago. I mean, that's just the reality. So I love that you said that, Scarlett, is you're like, nope, we're not doing it this year. We're going to try this instead.
Yeah. And I think that all comes back to those expectations, right? And we all have this expectation different in our head, but we have all these other people in our family and they have expectations of what it's going to look like. And if you don't discuss what that is, especially just with your spouse in your own home, they're not meeting the mark of what you're expecting from them. They don't even know that there was an expectation there without having those conversations with them. What do we want this to look like? What do we want our life to look like? So many people just float through life and they just let life happen to them and they don't decide, is this okay? Like y'all were saying earlier with when things got to a certain point, Ginger, in your life, like this isn't what we want our life to look like. We get to choose if we're going to continue down this path or if we're going to do something different. And there's things that you can put into place that's going to make your blend happen a little easier, a little faster. And I'm going to share the list right now before we wrap it up. And then ladies, if y'all have anything that you want to add, because this has been great conversation. And I think people are going to walk away from today saying, wow, okay, I've got some homework. I need to assess some things, maybe have some conversations in my household that we haven't had before. But some suggestions that they said in order to have this time as a family or time with your blended family is your daily prayer as a family. And that could look different. It could be before you walk out the house. It could be before bedtime. It could be when y'all come together after school, weekly game nights, weekly movie nights, going to church together or doing a Bible study together as a family, like some sort of Devo. They have a lot of different books out there. Reviewing each person's happies or crappies over dinner each night, which I think you've heard different ways, highs and lows. I love this one with the happies and the crappies because it just makes it sound a little more fun, and the kids probably get a kick out of that. Taking regular vacations 1 or more times per year and establishing fixed holiday routines and traditions. And so these are all just like some steps in the right direction. Please don't go take this and try to start all of them tomorrow, because you will get overwhelmed and you will quit or give up. But pick one. Like, we want to start praying together as a family. So talk with your spouse. How can we start praying together? What's a good time that we're all here together? And then just take those baby steps. And once y'all master that, or kind of master, because we don't hardly ever master anything, right? But it becomes more of a routine, then pick up one of these other things. And maybe transition day. Oh, okay. On transition day, when we get the kids, we do family game night or we do family movie night so that the kids have something to look forward to each time they're coming or going in your family. So as far as those things go, is there anything that y'all would like to add? Heidi, you want to
Well,
start?
one thing that I was gonna say, one thing that is kind of fun you could do is also as the children get older is have a jar, with a lid on it, and you can have paper next to it and let the kids start to jot down things that they would like to do as a family. And you can put it in there. And then instead of it being like, oh, choose little Susie's idea, you could draw those independently out of that thing and then discuss it as a family. What is this going to look like? What does it feel like and smell like? And when can we implement it? So that would be a good way to involve the children in that too.
That's a great
Nice.
idea. That's a great idea. Yeah. And I don't, something big for children. This was huge. Kids, when they transition, start to build up an animosity or an anxiety on their own transition day that we don't intentionally recognize. And you need to recognize that they're stressed even coming home. So to make their stress going away most of the time, and then they're stressed coming home. So to make an intentional effort not to grill them, because then that becomes a normal, like they have to answer all the questions. What did you do there? What did you eat there? Who did you see? Where were you? Did you do your homework? Did you floss? Did you brush? Did you, all of those things. Trying to make, they want to spend time with you. They're excited to come back to you. So don't make that time, make it an opportune time to blend with them and let them speak to you about things. Don't over grill them to where exchange day starts off by a hamper on their time, that they feel like they're in a third degree transition. I think it's really important just to let them transition and ask them what they want to do. And it's not, I know it's not always fun and games, but like Heidi had a great idea, or Scarlett had a great idea, incorporating their thoughts and what they want to do as a family, and let them start to build that transition and be excited to come home. That adds longevity to your relationship, instead of always making it so heavy in the transition home and then everybody having to come down from that escalation. So those are all good ideas, like we're going to get in the jar and do something, or we're going to start, we're going to go back to our transitions. Make your home, or try and make your home, the most comfortable place so that they're happy to come home.
Yes. And they said in the book, put the fun in dysfunction. So
Yeah.
I loved when I saw that, because I was like, that's exactly it right there. Put the fun in dysfunction. And that's what your kids need, guys. It's not as complicated as I think we make it out to be when it comes to our step families, because there is a lot of stress factors. And if we can lower those expectations, not in the way that Ginger was saying, as far as like, don't expect. Now, maybe, I mean, you might need to lower those expectations from that co-parent, because you cannot change them. You cannot make them. I mean, honestly, you can hardly have any expectations when it comes to what's going to happen in the other house. You can go to court, you can put some things into place, and then you can pray and hope, for the best in those situations. But even the things put in place for court orders, as an adult, they get to make the decision what happens in their house and if they're going to follow through with it. And unless you want to spend a lot of time in court and spend a lot of money in court, and we're going to talk about court later in the book, that's one of the later chapters, you're going to spin your wheels if you're trying to force somebody else to do what you think should happen for your blended family. But what you do have control over is how it's blending in your house, and to add more fun things in there, to have areas to connect with your children, either individually and as a whole, and you're connecting as a couple. And sometimes it can get overwhelmed because there is only so many hours in the day, and you might have to get creative of, okay, how are we going to make this work? Because we can't date each kid individually and date each other each week and do all these things as a family and still go to work and make money to provide for our house and do all the things like wash dishes and wash clothes. it could get overwhelming when you look at it that way, but just start small. Find something that you can do to incorporate that connection and that fun, whether it be when you're was talking before we went live, and if they have a sport that you have to go drive 30-40 minutes to go to, then you're using that car to have that connection and intentional time. Just look at your schedule, look at what you've got going on, and how can we blend during this time? How can we connect and give them our focus? And if you're very intentional with 20-30 minutes a day, or if you're even 10 minutes a day, if you're very intentional with that 10 minutes, your kids are going to feel seen and heard and like they mean the world to you. And if you're very intentional with like an hour out of the week where y'all are bonding, those things are going to carry over, because that's going to add up. Like Heidi was saying with the ornaments every year, every single one of those ornaments has a story that your child can go back and recall. And that's what spending that quality time with them does as well. So ladies, before we call this one quits, was there anything else y'all had from this chapter that was really speaking to you, or did we cover it all?
No, it's a good one.
There was a lot, but yeah, we got it. We got it good, ladies.
Yes. So yes, it was a whole lot. And I think this was the bulk of like blend in general though. So I did want to be able to hit on each of these topics. So B fam, any of y'all that are listening right now, you have some homework laid out in front of you. If you don't remember exactly everything we said, go back, listen to the episode again and take some notes this time, or grab, like what I do is while I'm listening to the audio version of the book, then I have my highlighter right there. I'm highlighting things that it's like, ooh, that's good, or ooh, that's something that I want to discuss with my spouse about, or that's something I want to do with the kids. Or sometimes it's just me and God need to have a moment with that and just take it to him. Like, Lord, this still breaks my heart and my blended family, and I don't know how to fix it, but I know you're a big God and that you can change anything in an instant. So I'm just going to keep believing that you're working in this area, and you don't even have to say anything to anybody, because that's the kind of God that we serve. So we love you. And until next time in chapter 7, do y'all know what that one is?
That's a good one. Parenting and co-parenting.
Parenting and co-parenting. That is a very sticky one, controversial. So focus on this one this time, and then we will dig into that more next week. All right, bye guys. Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.